It's time to experience Thrill of the Hunt, a collector's podcast.
Hey, kid, you want a toy?
What does the man know about toys?
Action figures each sold separately. Batteries not included.
With Kung Fu Grip, the hands that grip.
I have 3 of each. 1 to display, 1 to open, and 1 just in case.
Why do you keep all your toys in boxes? How do you play with them?
I don't. I collect them.
You're not a collector's item. You're a child's plaything. You are a toy!
Action figures and playsets for ages 6 and up. Way up!
Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Thrill of the Hunt. We're happy that you're joining us, and this episode we're going to talk about G.I Joe, a real American hero at 40. Yes, that's right. G.I Joe, a real American hero, is now middle-aged.
You've made it, G.I Joe. You can now loosen your belt and relax for the rest of the evening.
So that's what we're going to talk about on today's show. We did want to start the show on a bit of a sad note and just offer our condolences to Jason David Frank's family, to the Power Ranger community, and just in general. It was a huge loss for not only his family, but obviously the Power Ranger community, one of the most recognizable and outgoing actors who's donned the suit, if you will. So most of you, if you don't know who he is, he was the original Green Ranger, and then went on to be the White Ranger, as well as several other Rangers down the line. So I did want to call that out. I did have an opportunity to meet him once. He was very gracious with all of his fans. I never really heard bad things with him meeting his fans, only good things. So huge loss. We just wanted to put that out there and give our condolences.
Absolutely. And to add that it's very important to be aware of not only what you're going through individually, but anyone else you may know that's going through some difficult times, or if you feel like someone is being a little bit different than you usually expect them to be, look for signs and look for things like that, because it's important to be there for those around you, and in particular to be on the lookout for those signs, and to utilize resources like a suicide hotline that can really be of huge help. So I just want to make sure that we also take that opportunity to point to the opportunities to help others, and to be able to be aware of those situations that we need to be aware of.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Thanks for adding that in there, Brian. It's really important.
Absolutely.
But we'll kind of move on to some happier news.
So how was your Halloween?
Yeah, so my Halloween was good, uneventful. I kind of miss the younger days of like going out and dressing up for Halloween and stuff. They're pretty routine now. We don't do much. We stay home. But we did take a trip back to where Sarah and I are from, and we went to stayed and saw some family and stuff in the Chicagoland area. But we also went to the Chicago Toy Show. So
I've heard stories about this show many times from you. So
the stories are true, and it did not disappoint. And this is probably, I think the last time we went was probably 2014. The year before we moved down here, but it did not disappoint. I mean, it's just packed with stuff. If you can't walk away with something, like you didn't, you weren't looking hard enough, in my opinion.
Right.
Like I had to exert a tremendous amount of self-control, but
I believe it.
Part of that was because we traveled carry-on only, which is something Sarah and I are starting to do now with the crazy luggage loss and all that stuff. But so I was limited, but I did find a vintage 3PO case, and
nice.
Yeah. So I've been looking for one for a while. This one was in good shape. I got a good deal on it. I was a little concerned about how I'd get it back, but I didn't have I had my bag, but I didn't have my personal item. So 3PO is my personal item.
Oh,
on the
you
way
carried
home.
him? You carried him under your arm onto the plane?
Well, I had a bag and I put him, my sister.
Oh, it would have been even better.
Yeah, so my sister-in-law while we were there helped me wrap it and we put it in a bag and I carried it on that way, but it was well protected.
I can only like visualize like the medical procedure that happened as you as you prepared this item, as if it was like made of glass, this piece of plastic from back when, and you just wanted to make sure that there was no chance for anything to happen to this precious cargo.
Well, I'll be honest. I have to give the credit to Sarah's sister Claire. She's the one who did most of the work on it, and I didn't have to do anything. And she wrapped it like a pro. So it got home no problem. I picked up some 25th anniversary Joes, and then I picked up the Black Series Dark Trooper because just about everybody there was selling him for less than the ridiculously overpriced deluxe retail price. So I got him for 25, which we'll talk about it a little later, is not the cheapest price that he's been.
Well, I'll add to that later too when I talk about my Dengar purchase
experience. So how was your Halloween?
It was good. Yeah. We stayed home and home as any new listeners here, that would be Orlando. And surprisingly, for the first time ever, we actually had trick-or-treaters almost the whole night. I felt like I was in an alternate universe, maybe 40 years ago, right? Back in the time of when Joe was just starting, right? I felt like I had a throwback 80s, 90s experience. All the kids coming to the door saying trick or treat in costume. I was like, where and when am I? And it was awesome though. I loved it. And with our newer technology, we're like, oh, let's see this costume as we're looking at it as weird people through the Nest video. We're like, oh, look, they're coming up. But what was helpful about that is we didn't miss any kids. Like, we were able to see them coming. So we opened the door and they're like, oh, yay, and they came up. And so, in that case, technology worked really, really well. So we didn't miss any good trick-or-treaters. And that was a lot of fun. Watched a lot of horror and scary movies and stuff. And probably ate way too much candy. But, a classic Halloween experience.
That's awesome. You're absolutely right. We don't have them like that anymore because, where I live, they kind of do something in the neighborhood or they have trunk or treat or, you go to the mall, and they're giving out stuff. I have not seen like a good number of trick or treaters since it's been a long time. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And we actually, you speak about your Chicago trip. We took a trip out west in October, not right at Halloween, but during that time frame in the last month and a half. We went to Disneyland and we did a whole whirlwind of a trip. We went to Disneyland. We went to also California Adventure, but we also got to tour the Disney Studios. I actually saw the outside. I was hoping the door would open or I'd be able to sneak in. We saw where the volume was housed from the outside.
Oh, so cool.
We saw the actual stage. It's Soundstage 1, by the way. If you're ever curious and you're ever in Burbank and you're at Disney Studios, or if you're a cast member, you can go there on the lot anytime. As a cast member, you just can't go in the buildings and do stuff, but you can go there and go do stuff around there. But Soundstage 1 is actually where the volume is located, where all the filming is done. All in this tiny little studio of Walt Disney Studios. It's crazy that all of that happens there. And we also got the tour of Walt's original office, which was painstakingly put back into place as it was when he passed away in the 60s, in the late 60s. And what was really cool to see was the whole process, getting to see how forward thinking they were as an organization, even when they were building a lot of these buildings. He had the idea of building a tunnel underneath the art to the ink and paint shop so that the materials that needed to get the animation that needed to get worked on in the next group didn't have to go outside and be damaged. They went underneath in a tunnel connected to the other building, which gave them obviously the idea for the tunnels they eventually built in Disney World. If any of you know that, Disney World has a lot of tunnels underneath, especially in the Magic Kingdom park But it was cool to see kind of where everything began and to see all that and get a tour and do all that, which is, it's something you can do, but it's very unique. It's only offered in like a couple of months out of the year. And recently they've been offering it through the official Disney fan club organization, which you can buy a membership to, which allowed us to have a cheaper rate and early access to get that. But they only take groups of 8 on a tour. So it's really, you got to be on it. Like, it's like when we were on it about buying toys, right? When they go right up, right? And are collectible. It's the same way about getting these tickets. So if anyone's thinking about that in the future, definitely look into that. But what it gives you access to, Chris, I'm tying collectibles in here, where it gets you access to is the employee only store on Disney Studio property, where you can get things that you can get literally nowhere else.
Oh yeah.
And
I'm going to talk about that.
all right, I'll say that for later, but you're able to purchase things that are very cool, and we'll talk about that later. But we also got to go to Universal, so we got to check out Hollywood Horror Nights there. We also got to do the Oogie Boogie Bash, which is Disneyland's version of a Halloween party. And we also spent a day at the Academy of the Museum, Academy of the Motion Pictures Museum, which is the Oscars. And we got to see a lot of props from various films, some things that have never seen the light of day before. Like, we got to see a couple of props from 2001: A Space Odyssey, which, if you know the history of that film, there's not a lot left from it, because at that time it was very common to just destroy everything right after the films were over, and they would just toss it all out in the trash. So there's only like a handful of items that survived for 2001. 2 of those items are in the Academy Museum. One of those is one of the spacesuits of one of the major characters, and then also one of them is a full-size model of the ship that they use, the actual model ship that they used to film. I forget what the name of the ship was, but it's the orb-like circular ship. And it was so neat to see all those things. They had puppets, original puppets that were used on scene from Dark Crystal. I know some of our favorite movies there. I'm not going to reference that in particular. But there were some really cool things to see there, and got to do a lot in walking around LA. Definitely got my in and out double at one point. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Much like you had Chicago, I had a lot of fun in LA. And fit a lot into a small amount of time. We also went to the Funko headquarters store. I should say that, right?
Yeah.
That was amazing. I have so many photos. I need to go through them, and I should make a post on our site, on our social medias for you guys to see, because a lot of you don't get to see all that and be able to interact. But I took photos of every single diorama in there. So you'll be able to see whatever fandom you follow. It's so cool, the amount of detail and effort that went into building a store, and it's impressive. You can tell it was a labor of love by people who truly love collecting and toys, and you see it in that facility. It's impressive, really impressive. But yeah, and we even hit up Amoeba because we had to see kind of one of the last living like massive music stores that are still there in the middle of Hollywood. But it was cool. It was really cool, and had a lot of fun.
Yeah, that tour you talked about, some of us have been kicking around trying to do that at some point, because there's a group of us that are,
if you get a chance, you gotta do it. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity.
There's a group of us that are all big Disney, Lucasfilm, that whole area.
I want to do Skywalker Ranch. We got to get ourselves in there one day, Chris. We got to do that
for sure. And I'll add to it, if you're up near Skywalker Ranch, you got to go check out Rancho Obi-Wan.
Oh, obviously. That goes without speaking, that I would have to do both.
That place, Rancho Obi-Wan, will blow your mind. I was
got to go to Mecca and see Steve, man. Come on.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to go there once.
That's cool.
It was absolutely everything I thought it would be and more. And it's not like what I thought, they're gonna rush it, it's probably timed, so it was not rushed at all. It was you take your time, and it was a great way to cap that trip that we took out there. But absolutely, sounds like you guys had an awesome trip. Some cool stuff to see. You know, obviously nowadays with movie memorabilia, they keep everything, right?
Which I
Versus
love.
yeah, which those days they, like, you're absolutely right. They, if they couldn't reuse it, they trashed it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, but oddly enough, you know, we've kind of bypassed two holidays here. So we had Thanksgiving, which for us was pretty quiet, uneventful. We didn't
Same.
really, yeah, we stayed home. We didn't do much. Black Friday's not a thing, you know,
It don't exist anymore in
no,
person, does it?
no, it's when you looked at the stores, because I was, you know, like I said, I still try and hit the stores a couple times a week because I'm fortunate enough to have, you know, a Walmart and a Target like right there. So I still try
It's
and
like
go
a
out.
coffee break for you.
Yeah, and they were doing that, you know what was it, deals for days or whatever at Walmart.
Oh
But
yeah, something new each day. Yeah.
yeah, they were putting out stuff, but you know, it used to be it all went out on Black Friday, and it was just
Yeah.
like a huge. And this, they kind of space it out, and then they don't, you know, it's not nearly as much as it used to be because it's all online now. We all are shopping online, and then of course you do have. I think if people weren't already pushed towards online pre-pandemic,
Yeah.
I'm sure there was a nice chunk of people that got pushed that way, you know, from the pandemic. So it's probably an even greater share of the market now going to online versus in stores. And we went out that afternoon just locally. We didn't go straight too far from home just to see. And it wasn't like, it was busy, but it wasn't like I've seen it before where it was just mass hysteria.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely agree. Yeah. And which leads to talking about some of the Black Friday deals that everyone was partaking in, because it seemed like, let's mark down all those Black Series and Marvel Legends and Lightning Collection and classifieds, and everything was getting marked down to the price that we thought it should have been at the beginning.
Well, I think for me, I mean, I maybe I just haven't paid as close of attention in the past because I generally get what I want when it comes out. And maybe now
Right.
that I'm starting to play the long game a little more,
Welcome to the club.
yeah, I was realizing it, but there was still a disproportionate amount of Star Wars markdowns and
Oh, it
discounts
was
to
definitely more Star Wars than
to everything else. Right.
Agreed.
And so what was interesting, what I noted, and Amazon had the most of it. Amazon was
Yeah.
marking stuff crazy, ridiculous cheap.
They
And
did.
what I noticed was, and I wanted to point this out to our listeners, and we're going to discuss just a little bit here, is all those new quote deluxe unquote figures, all of them were marked below the regular, what you would consider regular retail of you know, what a regular retail figure is of 25 now. And I said that I picked up that Dark Trooper for 25, and I thought that was a decent deal. That thing was like $18 on Amazon on Black Friday.
Yep, it was.
So, you know, and I think it's interesting, and it's hard to say because Amazon does some great stuff on Black Fridays, as do other retailers. It's the time to make your money, get in the black, as they used to say. But the thing about that is, I'm wondering, are these deluxe figures not selling at these prices? Because it was, I mean, literally, it was every single one of them that we were all like, that should be a regular release. That should be a regular release. And
yeah, I think our points are being proven, not just us individually, but as a collector community. I think as a unison, we're all kind of making the same message through our various channels and our various podcasts and interactions online. I think we're all saying that, hey, we're not dumb. We know what you were doing the year before, and we know what you're doing now. We also are aware of the current economy. We are aware of inflation. We are aware of costs of production and shipping, but you're taking it to the extreme and trying to take advantage of it rather than just dealing with it and rolling with it. You're taking it and saying, how can we bleed even more out? And it's not, and people are seeing it, and they're putting their money where their mouth is, and they're not buying it at those extreme prices.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to see in a, maybe in a year from now, because they, general production for action figure is like 18 months, I think, 15 to 18 months. It'll be interesting to see if maybe we're getting less because things get whittled down a little bit. I don't want to make too many, like, I don't want to read too much into Black Friday sales because we do get Black Friday sales, but I don't think I've ever seen some of the deals that Amazon was offering. And it
Not
wasn't
at the
just
variety that
yeah,
we were seeing. Yeah. It's not like it was like, oh, we just made too many Luke Skywalkers in this run. We had 3 per case and they're just sitting around. It's not like it was that. It was every single figure in this wave, even the Ahsoka Tano Mandalorian figure, which you didn't see many times on the shelf, if one,
Yep.
on a shelf, was selling for $16. I mean,
Yeah,
that's telling you something.
That TVC Boba Fett with the 2 Stormtrooper helmets that they were trying to get like, almost $30 for, that thing was marked down to regular TVC, collection prices.
How about the Mandalorian Ahsoka Grogu Black Series
Yep.
pack that came with the cloth cape was marked down from 62, which was egregious, to 45, which is exactly where it should have been to begin with.
Yeah.
And
I
it
think
sold out like that.
Yep. A lot of that stuff sold out. I think collectors were waiting. And you're right. We did see it with Marvel Legends. We did see it with some of the older classified and older Lightning collection stuff.
Right. Been sitting around. Yeah.
Right. But the Star Wars stuff was by and far.
It was the newer stuff, even with Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's like yeah.
You and I were texting back and forth. I was texting
with back and forth to each other
with my Rogue 12 group, and then I'm texting with my buddy Sean, and we keep like sending these things back and forth, like, oh, look at this price. And I will say I was quite good. I didn't end up buying anything.
I only bought one. I bought Dengar, which is funny because I had bought him in person at a Target that I had got them to price match it down to $13 the day before. And then the next day I see Target put up for $9. I'm like, oh, so then I buy it from Amazon for the $9, and then I go bring back the other one to Target.
Hey, you know what?
It was another $5 difference. I was like, all right. If it was like $1, I wouldn't have cared, but it was like $5. I was like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. If it's $1 or so, I'm like, nah, no big deal. But when you start talking like $5, like you're getting, And that's
I played the long game on that Dengar.
Yeah, you did.
It's the only bounty hunter I needed to finish my bounty hunter set. And I was like, I'm just going to keep waiting. I remember when it was secondary market issues, because that was one we waited for them to re-release on an archive card for the longest time. And the best part is, Chris, when I get the figure in the mail from Amazon, it's supposed to be brand new. It was wrapped in cellophane, and like the packaging looked like someone had destroyed it, but the figure was fine. I was like, I don't care.
It's funny because I think we're starting to see a little bit more of that. Now I realize that the archive series is still on those card backs with a clear bubble, but with the plastic free stuff, man, I'm seeing more and more people online talking about like problems and missing things.
The Dengar had packaging tape wrapped around it to keep it closed.
Oh my goodness.
Like, I'm not exaggerating. I haven't opened it yet. Well, it's pretty much open,
was that one of those maybe warehouse deals?
No, it wasn't. That's the
thing.
It was listed as new from Amazon,
because that sounds like somebody,
but it looked like a warehouse sale, and I'm like, I don't care, it's $9.
Yeah, there you go.
I just wanted the figure anyway. I didn't care about the packaging.
Yeah, now you've got your bounty hunters,
and now I got my bounty hunter set I can lay out.
I think what you said is and we're seeing it. People are voting with their dollars finally, right? And I'm not saying people haven't been all along, but I think that when you combine where we are with inflation, where we are with how expensive collecting is, with the price hikes that we've had over the last few years due to pandemic and supply chain issues and all sorts of different reasonings, I think people are starting to maybe wake up a little bit and say, hey, so I'm interested to see where we are a year from now. and see, are we getting like, better selection? Are we getting less of a selection? Are we focusing more? Because, and we'll kind of dovetail right into it. The Return of the Jedi 40th stuff has
Right.
been coming fast and furious as far as announcements. And yakface.com wrote an excellent article about, and I should share it on our socials because it's really worth a read. Kind of talking about the ATST and how so far the 40th anniversary for Return of the Jedi has kind of been really lackluster with announcements, more like repack of the Jedi,
Oh, there we go. There's the line.
Yeah.
There's the tag right there. Repack of the Jedi.
So it's like, they had a good article that they wrote, and
I'm about to make a really hot take. I'm like, well, wasn't that the entire sequel trilogy?
right.
I'm
but
sorry. It was there for the
it's
taking.
it was. But it's really, I think people are becoming aware and people are saying, hey, I'm not going to jump in right away. Like today, that bunker looks great, and I have the Power of the Force 2 one, and
Yeah,
now we
I have it
know
loose, yeah.
now we know that the new one is bigger, right? I wanted to see that, but I'm not going to rush out and spend $60 on a hunk of plastic and a figure, right?
That thing is going to get marked down in the future.
All of those play sets
No.
have. And so, but the problem is here, it's twofold, right? Hasbro has conditioned us now, or, because we know that these markdowns are coming, right? No one's buying. I don't want to say no one. There are still people buying at full price, but now you've got more people playing the long game. And eventually, like, this is going to catch up. And that's what I'm saying. In a year, I'll be curious to see if we have either, less of a production run, or we have less of an assortment, or how all this is going to play together. That ATST, I have 2 of those already. I definitely don't need a third. I'm not going to get it, but the figures they've announced so far, I think all of them, we talked about it, I think a little bit on our Pulse coverage.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, Paplu was, we played the long game on him. We're going to win there. But Wicket's really the only new figure that they've announced so far. We know
pretty much
that they've pipelined some Rebel Troopers and some other figures that are new, but it's really kind of lackluster. And on the other side of that coin, I don't want to come across as jaded, because I realize, hey, we've done the 40th with Star Wars and with Empire, but this one feels different. This one feels like it's like, hey, we're going to throw every, repack and repaint we have possibly at you. I don't know. It feels different to me. Maybe I am a little jaded, first world problems. So,
oh my gosh. Yeah. And then you get to wait a couple more years, and then you'll get to see 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith. So,
there you
cycling
go.
around.
Yeah.
Cycling around.
Yeah. But kind of touching on where we are with product and stuff, ETAs mean nothing anymore.
No.
If you're a collector, you've been hitting the wallet, especially if you're a Hasbro collector. You've been hitting the wallet seriously, just like egregiously for this time of year.
Yeah. It's not just Hasbro too. I mean, NEC is already shipping out items that were listed, that they've been telling us, they give us a monthly update that was supposed to come out first quarter next year. They're hitting us with it right before Christmas. Is the Secret of the Ooze Turtle 4-pack VHS set and accessory set, and the reissue of Token Razor.
Oh, there you go.
Those are supposed to come out next year, and they're hitting a good 4 months early.
And that's what I've been hearing from I've got a large foot in the Hasbro world, but even Valaverse. I mean, we knew Bobby had told everybody that this stuff was probably going to arrive in Q4, but you have the special deployment wave, which just arrived. And then behind that, you have the females, which they're going to hold until the beginning of next year, which I appreciate. I really do. But it really makes it hard to budget on a time of year where we're thinking about others rather than ourselves. And it's really, I'm enjoying everything I've got. I don't want to complain. I'm glad to have some stuff early, especially since some of this stuff, it's like we only got one wave of Power Rangers this year until we got this wave that I just got. We only got really one wave of classifieds. Well, maybe two, but it kind of came in end of last year, beginning of this year, depending on when you were lucky enough to receive them. But really, it was only that Spirit Storm Shadow wave we got in July. It's almost like we are getting half a year's worth of product right now. And I know that some of it has been retailers are just backed up with product. I'm hearing reports that, and my Walmart's the same. They're parking pallets all over the floor because they don't have any room in the back room to store stuff. Retailers are sitting on product like crazy. And then you have all the stuff that was probably sitting in the supply chain, sitting in containers. It's finally made its way over here. And I get that. There's also the fact that it's Q4 and companies want to finish strong. And there is also some conjecture that Hasbro maybe wants to push to finish stronger than they have the rest of the year because financial reports have come out. I don't put too much credence in that because there's only so much they can do in the supply chain area. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make is it makes responsible collecting and budgeting really hard.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
And if those dates mean nothing going forward, then that's a problem. So I hope that this is just like an anomaly and we're going to kind of get back to normal, where you can kind of count on when stuff's going to be released.
Yeah.
But if not, it's really hard because I can't get the stuff that I got this month. Like I can't maintain that. I can't be doing it like that.
And you wonder why I have transitioned to 6 scale, because I have set payment plans. I know I can map out when things are going to be charged because I know when it's going to happen. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I made that shift, is because it allows me to be more financially prepared, right? When you're buying 12 scale or 18 scale or 3 3/4 figures, when it ships, you get charged. And it, like Chris just said, if it hits all at once, ouch. Because there's no way to really pre-plan for it if that shipment gets in early, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, they have an idea, but yeah.
Right. Outside of that, I mean, I keep a spreadsheet. Not only do I keep what it costs me, I keep the estimated arrival date so I can kind of keep an eye and go, okay,
everyone should.
This is right. This is next year, so this probably isn't going to come all at once and this and that. But I do feel like this might be a bit of an anomaly, but it doesn't seem like it's just toys. It seems like it's just retail merchandise in general is kind of having that problem. But obviously as collectors, it's impacting us. And like I said, it's impacting us at a time of year where, we, maybe you need a little extra cash on hand.
Which leads us to, what is the heaping pile of things that you've gotten most recently, Chris?
Well, before we get there, there's one more thing I want to cover, and that so, we had it in our show notes here that we didn't know we had, kind of, is Dorkside Toys going under?
And then hour before we record.
Yep. It's all over the website now that says that their last day will be, I believe it's December 18th.
Correct. Yeah. That's what they put up. Yeah.
They are indeed closing up shop. There's been a lot of conjecture, a lot of stuff going around as to what happened. I don't know what happened. I know that there's been talk of some shady business practices. I know there's been talk of PayPal, them kind of going against PayPal agreements. I know that I personally had seen Dorkside Toys selling product at shows for higher than retail prices. When on their website, they had them at retail, and then here people got orders canceled. I did see that personally, as did some friends. That was probably 10 years ago that I saw them doing that. And I know that they opened a retail location in Tennessee.
Oh, really? I didn't.
Yeah, they had a brick and mortar in Tennessee that's been going for about 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
And I'm sure that sucked a huge portion, the overhead on brick and mortar for a toy store anymore. It's tough. I mean, if there was some shady stuff going on, it's hard to sit here and defend them. I know Megalopolis, I think was what they were called. They left a lot of
Oh
fans.
gosh,
Yeah, they
yeah.
left a lot of people holding the bag, and people kind of like had memories of that dealing with this. I don't think this has been that,
Yeah,
but
and then they tried to rebrand themselves as premium DNA
yeah,
toys, and
yeah. I
yeah,
don't think this has been that, but the silence, when this
is
when
deafening.
yeah, when it was swirling around and they weren't
Yeah,
Dorkside wasn't addressing it. But it's sad from a perspective of, it's one less place we have to go in a
I
world where we
know.
already don't have Toys R Us, we don't have KB Toys. You've really only got Big Bad Toy Store and Entertainment Earth. I know there's a lot of other smaller ones.
I want to
But
give a
if
shout out to a small store
Yeah, go ahead.
that I got my Mirage Casey from. That was impeccable service and awesome. It's called The Last Toy Store, and also what a great name.
Yeah.
Oh,
How appropriate.
yeah, and they have a official license to sell NECA materials. They also sell some vinyl. They sell a good mixture of things. Super 7, all kinds of different things. They also sell some of the previews exclusive stuff as well. But they're just starting out. But I've been really impressed with their service. The items arrived in pristine condition, well packaged. Really impressed.
Yeah, and we need to, as much as we can, if those places are competitively priced, we need to be supporting them
Oh,
because
and they were.
we need to have those options. And the last thing I'll say, I kind of will miss about Dorkside is the fact that it was a place where they would break up packs of things. So if there was the 3-pack of Vipers, they were going
Oh, I
to
remember
break it
that.
up.
Yeah.
They also did Build-A-Figures. So if you didn't want to spend, if you didn't want the figures, you could just buy the Build-A-Figure. Now the Build-A-Figure would almost cost you as much as the Wave, but if you didn't want to deal with having to,
you mean like
those,
the Captain America?
yes, well there was that.
You remember?
Yeah. But if you didn't want to have to deal with those other figures from the Wave, you could just purchase that. But again, like I said, I don't think we're ever going to know all the ins and outs of things.
One day the story will be told.
Yeah. I can just say from personal experience that I've dealt with them, I never had a problem, but I have heard from people that there's been some shady stuff too. So I guess we're losing another toy store, but let's talk about some positives and what we've got.
And I'll start off. I'll say, and I showed Chris this the other day when he was over. I got my Mythos Obi-Wan Sideshow 6-scale figure. Not straight from Sideshow. It's actually an older figure that I got. They've gone 2 different batches of that figure. Right now, it's been sold out for quite a few months. Not a surprise considering the Obi-Wan Kenobi show and how popular that was. But I was able to get it off of a great one of the people I bought from before, who another collector who lets go of some of his stuff that I'm looking for and so forth. Collectors helping collectors there. And got it for a really amazing price. And what's great about the version I have is it's the early release that had the double elbow joints and double jointed knees, which is great for posing. Whereas the newer one has a lot lesser articulation. It's just a single joint elbow with a pivot, kind of a pivot joint there on the elbow instead of a full bend. So I was pretty excited about that. I also got for my wife for her birthday. She got something that she never expected to get because I was able to work some rewards and deals and things like that. I got her the premium format statue of Ahsoka Tano and Mirai from Rebels. It sits right above my head right now as we record. Beautiful piece. And also got the NECA armored last run of myself, and then thanks to Chris, I have the NECA unarmored last Ronin. So I have the complete set of those guys. I'm very appreciative of that. And also a couple of items I got from a friend of mine that just knew I loved vintage stuff as well as modern toys. Some vintage LJN PVC figs from ET. I showed Chris those the other day too. It was pretty cool seeing them with still their original price tag on it. That was like $1 something from when they came out in '82. And then also on the third party end of the 6 scale, I was able to get the Chosen One, which is basically a unlicensed Anakin Skywalker with rooted hair, not great rooted hair, but it's nice to have that version of Anakin from Revenge of Sith and not pay a ridiculous aftermarket price. And I can work with the head sculpt and the hood to make it look good. But that was pretty cool. And Mars Toys Joker, which is basically my best chance to get a Jack Nicholson 1989 Joker and not have to pay ridiculous aftermarket prices on that as well. So that's kind of also I will say from Black Friday I did get a couple of deals that I did mention earlier. King Ghidorah Monster Arts figure, it was just so dang cheap. I was just pulled in. I've looked at that figure for a good 2 years.
Yeah, you have.
I got it for less than $100. You can't pass that up. That's over a $250 figure when it first came out. Okay, that was a steal of a price. We'll see if it actually goes through and they ship it. We'll find out. As of right now, it's still sitting there. So we'll see. Just like my entertainment, that was with GameStop. With Entertainment Earth, I was able to get the NECA They Live Alien 2-pack figure set for $32. That's like an $80 2-pack, by the way. That was a ridiculous deal. And what else? Oh, and Death from Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey from Incendium. Normally that's about I believe like $28-$29 figure. I got it for $16. So those were, I think, the rest of my exciting deals that I got.
Yeah, making that money go as far as it can. And
Yeah.
and just for our collectors out there, keep an eye, through the end of the year. Very beginning,
at you, man.
There's going to be some more sales, and I think we haven't seen the last of some of the crazy Amazon prices and stuff on things. So, and let me just add that I had a chance to stop by and visit with Brian and his wife. My wife and I stopped by and visited with them for a little while, and I got to see the Mythos Obi-Wan and the premium format Ahsoka, and my goodness, those are impressive pieces. Like, you need to see those in person. If you haven't seen them, you have to see them in person. They are fantastic.
They're huge.
Yeah, they are.
The Ahsoka is huge. Yeah,
that Ahsoka is massive. Like, I had no idea. I mean, you look at the picture and you don't get a perspective of how big it is, but it's fantastic.
Yeah. And I got a corresponding art piece from I was able to buy directly from Woodside. You've met him before, I'm sure.
Probably,
him and his
yeah.
wife.
Yeah,
and his wife. Yeah. They both do art together. They come usually to Epcot every year to do the art festival. I'm sure they'll be back again, but he put up some extra AP copy prints he had of the Unyielding print, which is that almost the exact same pose of Ahsoka in the statue pose when she's fighting and with the Rebels version of Darth Vader behind her. So I'm excited whenever that ships and gets to me to frame it and put it behind or right aside next to the statue. So
yeah, awesome. And so, with your big list, my list is
right?
equally as big. But first, I want to point out, so we alluded to it a little earlier. Brian picked me up from the company store there at Disney. It's a Lucasfilm baseball cap, and not only is it a Lucasfilm with the Lucasfilm in a really sharp green, it's got Yoda on the side. So yeah, that's going in the Yoda collection there. That hat will not be worn. So that was a really sweet piece to have.
And that
something
was carried onto the plane.
Yeah, see, there's a theme going on here. But that piece is really sweet to have with something that says Lucasfilm with Yoda on it. So that's awesome. But the laundry list of other things I've gotten, I got the Gundam Universe Shenlong, which completes the Gundam Wing original 5 Gundams.
There you go.
Yep. So now we're going to see if they're going to do the upgraded suits. So in the show, 3 of the suits get upgraded. And so we're waiting. Now I'm waiting to see if they're going to do the upgraded versions of those
popular.
suits.
I never see a lot of them sitting on the shelves too long.
Yeah. Well, what surprised me is usually I get stuff from my pre-orders and then I don't see it in the stores for a couple, 3 months or so. But I saw Shenlong at Target today and I was like, wow, he didn't take long to get out.
That's surprising.
And I only have one on pre-order right now, and it's the Leo suit. It's kind of a generic suit that was used in Gundam Wing, but that one's a nice slow burn, so it doesn't I don't have to worry about trying to keep up with that one. I got Transformers Ironhide. I am still picking up a Transformer here or there if it goes with the movie or with that has that G1 kind of aesthetic. I'm pretty much done. There's a few left that I if they put out or whatever, but I'm pretty much done there for the most part. Now we're gonna get into Classifieds Wave 9, which was Stalker and the Crimson Twins, and then Tiger Force Outback. The only Tiger Force figure I'm getting, they did him in the instead of doing him with his orange hair and orange beard and all, he's got the the gray. So it looks really cool, and I thought it was worth it for that. I got Dr. Mindbender.
You've been talking about that one for a while.
Yeah, not one of my favorite characters, but I'm like, you got to have it. He's got to go with the G.I. Joe. The Sergeant Slaughter, the G.I. Joe version.
Right,
so
now you have both.
I now have two Valaverse versions and the G.I. Joe version. Serpentor, and the Air Chariot. Now, I am not a huge Serpentor fan, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to tease a little bit. You should expect to hear that figure on our year in review show. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
All right.
Special deployment series from Action Force. Rollout. I got my thankfully before I was early when at Joe Fest when Bobby announced that Dorkside was going to have the infantry trooper exclusive. I ordered it as soon as it went up, and I think I was probably one of the first ones to get it. So I got it before all this stuff started going down, and I also got my pre-orders because I pre-ordered it from them. Since I already had the exclusive there, I pre-ordered that wave and I got those. So those are really cool. I got the Time Force Blue Power Ranger with Vector Cycle, and you're going to hear about that figure on the year in review show for a different reason. We might be adding, I'll tease here, we might be adding a worst category.
Oh, new category.
Yeah. That figure, without going into it too much, that figure, if you go search online, that figure is popping up quite a bit with a lot of QC issues. But I got Wild Force Blue from Power Rangers, Dino Thunder Yellow, which now means that the Dino Thunder team we're only waiting for Dino Thunder Black, which is another representation of Tommy, Jason David Frank's character. And that's coming next year. So that'll complete that set. Motu Origins has been coming fast and furious. So I have waves 9 through 11. And what's crazy about that is it's been once a month, they've been sending out stuff. And usually Motu was maybe 3 times a year. So it's just been crazy to keep up with. a score of TVC from various places that have been coming in, and then the Droid Factory, the Halloween droid, and then the Christmas droid. And the Christmas droid is adorable. It's like a little snowman. So that
Nice.
oh, but when we talk about what I'm looking forward to, some
yeah,
of
go
that,
right into it. Go right
well,
into
some
it.
of that arrived today. I kid you
No
not.
way.
Yeah,
What was
yeah.
it?
So my G.I. Joe Classified Wave 10, everyone but Dusty arrived today. So Zorana, and then I got two of the Crimson Guards, and then my Power Rangers Lost Galaxy Green, which was on my looking forward to, arrived today. So yeah, so
that
I tell
flows with what we were saying earlier.
Yep. So so the stuff that I haven't got, Black Series, Aaliyah Sakura, which we're both looking forward to.
Yeah.
I have a sneaking suspicion she's going to ship early. Wave 13 of the for Power Rangers, the Dino characters. I'm not getting the other two, but the Dino Charge Blue and Dino Fury Green.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to those. And then I'm looking forward to and this is an area we'll probably get into. I'll talk a little bit more on our year in review. My Stan Solo glow in the dark Jedi ghosts.
Some Stan Solo.
Yeah, I there's some good stuff that he's done this year that I'll be calling out. Yeah. So a shorter list than the stuff I've got, but that's because it's been like crazy.
Well, I only have a few things on my list, but there are a couple more I'll add on that I'll say towards the end. The first three are Hot Toys related. Still waiting to see when Ahsoka from The Mandalorian, Ahsoka with Grogu Deluxe, comes out. It just keeps getting pushed back from month to month to month, so we'll see. It was supposed to come out in September, but we're still waiting. And then also Doc Brown, which just came out yesterday in Hong Kong, surprisingly. So that's coming out soon, but I have a payment plan, so I'm in no rush. I'll get it beginning of next year. As well as the DeLorean's release date got pushed up to April of next year. I mean, just moved up a few months. It was supposed to originally be in like June or July.
Yeah, but that's cool. Finally, the DeLorean.
It's going to be something.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, you're gonna have to come over for that. You're gonna have to come over for that one
for sure.
For putting that out.
We might have to do like just a whole show reviewing that.
yeah, we should do that. That'd be fun. But yeah, there's that, and as a lot of people's stuff has been shipping, I'm still waiting on getting my shipping alert. But my Secret of the Ooze Ninja Turtles 4-pack in the collectible VHS packaging and the accompanied accessory set should be shipping any day now from NECA, that I mentioned earlier in the show. That was originally supposed to come on first quarter, but should be coming soon. So those are the things that are most pressing for me. But now it's time to refocus ourselves to something very near and dear to my partner's heart.
Johnny, catch! Oh no! Let's tell Mom it was Billy's mistake.
You're making the mistake.
Flint!
Anyone can have an accident, but lying makes it worse.
But Mom will be upset.
She'll be even more upset if you lie. And how would you feel if Billy got punished? Face up to what you've done. Don't take the easy way out.
We'll tell her we did it.
Remember, it's better to tell the truth.
And that's no lie. Now we know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
Go for it, Chris.
Well, I feel like I should. So,
Go, Joe.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to talk about, as we alluded to, G.I. Joe, a real American hero at 40. But before we get there, I think we kind of have to talk about the history of G.I. Joe, because
how did it begin?
Yeah, it didn't start as that line that we know of today. It started in 1963 when Stan Winston developed the idea that would become G.I. Joe, and he showed it to Donald Levine at Hasbro, and then Weston licensed the whole concept to Hasbro for $100,000.
If
Now, if
only
you-
he knew then.
Yeah. And so if you watch The Toys That Make Us, they kind of talk about
Right.
that a little bit, because he would have made they did actually offer him a royalty, like a percentage deal or a straight, yeah.
Oh.
And he took the straight, whereas if he had taken the percentage, he would have been a multimillionaire. But such as these things go, right?
It's like McDonald's, right?
Yeah.
Same thing happened to the McDonald's brothers.
Yep. So I mean that's how G.I. Joe started. G.I. Joe was inducted into the National Toy Hall of Fame in 2004 and into the Pop Culture Hall of Fame in 2017. So that just tells you how popular that brand has been.
It's a part of the cultural zeitgeist.
Absolutely.
There
And
you
zeitgeist,
go.
I want everybody to keep that word in mind, because we're going to talk about a little bit later. I think it's important to talk about, when we talk about G.I. Joe, what's going on in our kind of world view.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
True.
So zeitgeist is the perfect word for that. But I want to say G.I. Joe it's spawned several comics, TV series, and video games. Some are in support of toy lines, some are standalone. I'll be mentioning, or we'll be mentioning some ones directly related to the toy history. I do want to mention the G.I. Joe Resolute. It's kind of my favorite G.I. Joe TV. It's not really a series. It was done as a series, kind of a very small, like 10-15 minute episodes, kind of
Sure.
like what Clone Wars did when Tartakovsky did it, only these were a little longer, but they've released it as a one set. It's a very gritty, more adult G.I. Joe. I mean, they're not parachuting out of their vehicles and landing safely. Like characters are getting killed. Yeah. So
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and I do want to mention, and I don't know if Hasbro's doing this currently, but they have a lot in recent years. They'll stream a lot of the episodes on their YouTube channel as well.
Absolutely. That is absolutely true. And you have A Real American Hero is on there. And then also I'm drawing a blank on I think Renegades. Does that sound correct?
Sounds right to me.
Yeah, the Renegade series, which at first I was like, yeah, but then the more I watched it, I actually enjoyed that series quite a bit. Obviously, Brian, we know that there have been
talk about them.
3 live action G.I. Joe movies.
Yes.
Really, they all with varying
2
degrees.
of them filmed in my hometown.
Yep, that's true. Varying degrees of adhering to the source material. And if you're a Joe fan, generally these movies have not been well received.
I don't hate them.
No, I mean, look, I think it's been like anything else, right?
I can find some excitement in it. I can find some joy in it.
It's been diminishing returns, I think, for each one. And I think the first one, they went big, right? They tried to go big, and I think they tried to change too much.
Yeah, that whole twist reveal stuff going on throughout the whole thing. Yeah.
I think the second one, they tried to pull back on it and make it a little bit more.
And they tried to focus on getting some really good action actors in there with Dwayne Johnson and Bruce Willis. And
yeah. And then the third one is just, it is what it is.
I haven't even seen that one. I haven't brought myself to do it.
I watched it. I waited till it was free, and I watched. I wasn't going to pay to watch it.
I've been waiting to hear your opinion about it.
As an action movie, as a kung flu or action movie, it works great. It's fine, right?
Let's say for everybody who's not aware, we're talking about this. That's Snake Eyes.
Correct.
That's the one that's more character focused.
Yeah, but as an origin story for the character. Or characters in this case, because you've got Storm Shadow in there as well.
You can't have Snake Eyes without Storm Shadow.
Completely off the reservation. It's just it's not even. Yeah, it's just not even. There's so much that's wrong with it, and from what we know, and I can appreciate them trying to try something new, but that's not we have these problems with movies now where, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but where Hollywood executives are trying to make it appeal to a general audience, and they forget about the audience.
Too much influence.
Yes, they forget about the audience that actually got them there, and they try and make it a wider, cast a wider net, and things get lost. But as an action movie, it's fine. If you want to see good action and, some great martial arts, I can recommend it. And like Brian said, I think there's something in all of them. I don't hate them, but I'm certainly not rushing to turn them on and watch them. As we talked about, 2022 marks the 40th anniversary of a Real American Hero toy line, but the brand itself is now 58. So we talked about a Real American Hero being middle age. The brand itself is getting close to retirement.
They're getting AARP membership applications in the mail. Yeah.
So we're gonna, we'll kind of go into the toy history now, and I'll kind of let Brian run with this first part here.
Yeah. When we talk about G.I. Joe and the toy lines, it all really starts with the 3 3/4 figures that came around in the 80s. But even before that, if we go back to even the earliest time frame,
G.I. Joe, fighting man from head to toe, on the land, on the sea, in the air.
G.I. Joe attack! Boom, boom! G.I. Joe takes the hill! Bam, bam! Horrific battle!
Terrific equipment to have a battle with. When you get G.I. Joe and the authentic G.I. Joe equipment, you'll have the greatest realism, the greatest fun you ever had in playing soldier. Box after box of authentic uniforms and equipment, so you can change your G.I. Joe soldier into a camouflage Marine ready for battle, a Navy frogman with complete scuba suit and inflatable life raft, an Air Force pilot with high-altitude helmet and air vest. Get G.I. Joe and get G.I. Joe equipment, so you can set up exciting battle action whenever you want. Remember, only G.I. Joe is G.I. Joe.
In the 60s and in 70s, much like that time with all figures, it was very much like Mego was making a lot of toys, and Barbie, and you had a lot of the 12-inch scale, right? Or 10 to 12-inch, scale, depending on the character. And at that time, and I think we've even touched this in some of our early episodes when we talked about kind of the first toys, if you will, even because G.I. Joe's in that group of being some of the first toys ever made for focused on young boys, obviously because of the military nature of the figures and characters at the time, because military was totally focused on males at that time. Females weren't really allowed to be considered soldiers per se in that time frame. It wasn't until much later on that the military became more accepting and equal in opportunity for both sexes to be in all levels of military. And correct me if I'm wrong there, Chris.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, women, unless we're talking, well, even in
talking more like front lines kind of thing.
They were behind the scenes in support roles or nurses or those kinds of things.
Exactly.
The frontline stuff didn't really come about until that wasn't even until the 90s.
I would say 90s. Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. Really, in the 90s is when that started becoming more to the forefront, and policy started changing in that respect in the real world, not just the toy world. But yeah, I mean, a lot of that, what I think, much like during that time, just like Star Wars in the late 70s that had Palitoy working on that in the UK, the same thing was going on with G.I. Joe here as well, when we talk about the international connection early on. But in the beginning, it focused on the main four branches of the military: Air Force, Marines, Army, and Navy, and having a soldier depicted in each of those units. And it really was the first action figure. I mean, that's where the term was really coined, was with the figures that came out in the mid to late 60s with G.I. Joe.
Yeah,
And that's
isn't
where the
it?
term adventure came from. Like the idea that we call it the action hero line, the adventure hero line that you
Yep.
see now is a play off of what they used to call those figures early on.
Yep. Well, it's funny because I didn't realize that previous to Hasbro kind of coming up with action figure,
Oh
they
yeah.
actually called them boys dolls.
Yeah, they did. If you listen to, and I'm sure you will have heard some clips at this point. We'll add in post. You'll hear that they actually did reference it that way in some of the early commercials because they didn't know what to call it. Because before that, there was really just Barbies and dolls and things like that.
Yeah.
There hadn't been something for the boys.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's kind of where it all began.
Yeah. You have
and then we turn to the 80s when Chris and I came to the world, but Chris first, and you started playing with a bit smaller scale and a bit different material, huh?
Yeah. So I mean, and this is just so you really kind of have three eras of GI Joe now, and we talked about the original, which was kind of from 64 to 76, and we should add that by the late 60s, Hasbro was really desperately distancing themselves from the war theme because of Vietnam, right?
What was going on?
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's where Brian had mentioned that the name got changed to the Adventure of G.I. Joe and then the Adventure Team. But that's why, is because of what was going on. And G.I. Joe is one of those toy brands that's always kind of been connected to what's going on. But like you said, Brian, we get into the Real American Hero line and the kind of the comeback of G.I. Joe. And that's the 3 3/4, 1/18 scale. And that runs from 82 to 1994. It was launched alongside Marvel Comics to support the toy line.
Right.
And surprisingly, when I was doing my research, I did not know this. And I was surprised to find out that it ran for the entirety of the toy line from 82 to 94, which is almost unheard of for a comic line to run that long alongside of a toy line to support a toy line. The comic series was much more real world and gritty. And if you talk to a lot of people, the comic series is often more beloved than the TV show because it was more, like I said, it was real, it was gritty. People were getting injured, characters, like in comics, they don't really kill characters, but characters would be quote unquote killed. And then you'd find out that they weren't, they'd come back, but they'd at least, give you that real world.
I remember.
Yeah.
I remember the series. I remember seeing the comics because I still have my G.I. Joe lunchbox from when I was a kid. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I still have that. And I remember the comics because I can remember the RAH logo on the top left of the comic.
Yep.
For Real American Hero. And yeah, I can see it in my head right now. Like, I can see the comics in my head when I was younger. And I remember them just being very violent. Yeah. Now that you say it, I remember seeing lots of explosions on the page. Like, yeah. Now that you say it, like it's vivid in my mind. And I also, I was also reading a lot of Turtles came out at that time too. So I was reading the Mirage comics, which were also very adult. The Mirage comics, people don't think of this, not about Turtles. I just want to show you the time frame of what was happening. The comics were always very heavy and adult oriented at that time. Even the Turtles were. Everybody think, oh well, you see the fun of the TV show of the 80s, the Turtles show or the G.I. Joe show. They were all very fun and like very animated characters and everything. I'm like, yeah. But the comics were very different for both of those groups and all the groups really that were going on at that time.
Even Transformers comics, those were a lot heavier.
Yep. Yeah. That was the theme then. That was kind of the way they went about it.
Yeah. But you talk about TV shows and so The TV show really comes about because the popularity of commercials that are promoting the comic books. So that led to a 5-part miniseries done by Sunbow Productions that aired in 1983, called The Mass Device. And then 1984 would see another 5-part miniseries called The Revenge of Cobra or The Weather Dominator, depending on, when it is. That title used to be The Weather Dominator, but it's since changed to The Revenge of Cobra. But they launched those miniseries based on the comic, and then G.I. Joe saw in 1985 it would get a full 55 episode season, and then 1986 would get a 30 episode season. And then we're going to come to G.I. Joe the movie. So in 1987, it comes out. Now we should preface
blame it on the Transformer.
Yep. And oddly enough, and I did not know this either, but when we're researching the episode, G.I. Joe was supposed to be the first one released.
I did not know that.
Because of delays, Transformers got its film release first.
I do remember that.
Yep. The poor run of Transformers and My Little Pony meant
the My Little Pony movie. Yep. Oh God, I remember that.
Yep. They both did poorly at the box office, and Hasbro was dealing with people outcrying the Optimus Prime death in the Transformers movie. Yeah. So G.I. Joe the movie would be released direct to video. It never was. And what's weird is my memory of that. I swear, how sometimes memories change, or they're not like, I swear I remember
now.
I swear I remembered seeing that in theaters, but this is, that clearly can't have been.
I guess you could have been in a theater like environment to see it. Maybe it was like a special showing of something, or who knows.
But that movie is highly polarizing within the fan and collecting community. There's people that really like it. There's people that don't, that don't care for it, and people all in the middle. You would see, let's see here, Dick Entertainment, or Deke, I think it was pronounced.
Yeah, Deke. That's how I remember. That's how it was said. Yeah.
Would do the second run of G.I. Joe Real American Hero, and it ran from 89 to 91.
I watched the hell out of that one.
Now, see, I don't remember watching that one, and I'm desperately trying to get my hands or find where I can watch some of those,
because that was like 5 to 7 years old. That was hitting me in the.
And see, that's where I was aged. I was aged out. So by then, I was aged out.
That was hitting me. That was my demographic they were hitting at that point.
Yeah. And that's why I don't remember seeing those, but they only did 44 episodes. If you know where to find that, hit me up on my socials, because I haven't seen a place that's selling it for a reasonable price. But the scale choice for A Real American Hero was strictly driven by the success of Kenner's Star Wars line. So it wasn't, there's a lot of stories, but it was directly influenced by the Star Wars line and what they could do.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And then the cool thing as a kid, the card back came with a file card that you could cut out, and it told you about that character. And I believe it was Larry Hama who wrote those. He also did a ton with the comic books. And those are absolutely gold. It's an absolute shame that what they pass off as a file card on their 25th anniversary line, or maybe not. I'm sorry, maybe not the 25th anniversary line, but their retro and O-ring line now.
Right.
They're like, it's not anything, but but those were cool. For me, we talk about the 3 eras of G.I. Joe, and we'll talk about the last era, the current era, if you will. But for me, within A Real American Hero, you can divide that one up into 3 phases, and that's not anything official. That's just how I break it up.
Yeah.
But I want to give Brian, you want to give the listeners some context as to what's going on before I break down these eras?
Yeah. So what we're breaking down here is, so obviously Chris said in the beginning that Real American Hero and G.I. Joe was heavily impacted, whether it was mirroring or utilizing what was going on in the world to kind of have an impact on not only the look and feel of the figures and situations, but also how it was being pushed or marketed to the public as well. And also there at that time, obviously figures based on characters who are fighting and are part of a military are best served when there are times of turmoil, strife, things going on in the world, right? So Chris kind of, and I'll let you say it. I mean, it's tied to moments where there's conflict in the world.
Yeah.
And
so,
yeah.
If you think about, I'll kind of go through. I'll start with what my first era, and then we'll talk about kind of what's going on in the world. But
right, we'll get more context on it.
Yeah, I consider from 1982 to 1986. I consider that the military focused part of the line and the before the G.I Joe movie. Now that's an important distinction because there is. You will hear that in the fan community, the before the movie and after the movie. And a lot of early fans of the line will say that this was the golden era of the line. And that's where I fall. I believe that from 82 to 86 was the golden era of the line. And that's where you see, kind of the line has its heyday. I mean, to give you some background, in 1985, it sees the USS Flag aircraft carrier being released.
I got it! Wow!
Here it is, the USS Flag aircraft carrier. Imagine being on the deck of this aircraft carrier.
The USS Flag is fantastic! It's so big! Lowering that! Little monsters! Get ready to launch aircraft! Where's the Admiral? Not here!
G.I. Joe!
Fire! We got Cobra! Joe!
USS Flag aircraft carrier comes with what you see here. Other figures and equipment sold separately.
Joe!
Yeah, that's a good one. But I was going to say...
I was like dying when he goes, where's the Admiral? He's not here!
That was good.
Oh my God.
But I remember going over to a kid's house, and we were supposed to be playing with him outside. And we go up to his room to get something, and he's got the flag. And I kid you not, Brian, it literally took up half of this kid's room as a kid. And we were like, can we just stay inside and play? My brother and I were like, can we just stay inside and play for a little while? So we started to, and his mom's like, I thought you guys were going outside. And I remember their kids like, they wanted to play with the flag.
Oh my gosh.
That is the largest vehicle / play set ever be released. Ever. Yeah. And it's quite amazing to think that, the line was that popular that it could support something that not only that big, but that expensive. That was a just over $100 toy in 1985 money.
It's funny. I was talking to a collector in a Target during Black Friday, and we were talking about the flag, and he was talking about how he had a friend who had one. He was helping him set it up, and it was interesting. It's always fun to run into collectors. And he's like, I can't believe. He's like, I remember when because he's around our age, and he was like, I remember when it was in the store. I just couldn't believe how massive it was.
Yeah,
and he still remembers that from when he was younger. But going back to what you said about the time frame of the early to mid and even beginning of the late 80s, there's a lot going on in the world at that time. Obviously we're dealing with a Cold War with Russia still. Yep. Just a different one, but later on, I think about 20 years later, the war. I mean, let's be honest, the Cold War never ends with Russia. It still continues to this day, but there are phases of it, right?
Yeah,
there's different leaders at different times.
I think.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think that particular phase, when I was looking at research, they call it it's still the Cold War, but it's the new Cold War because things have heated up again.
Right. It's not like Bay of Pigs, from the 60s and the 70s, what led to pushing us into getting into other conflicts, like Vietnam and Korea and things like that. But also, what also was going on in the 80s, especially in America, was the Reagan regime.
Yep.
And that Reagan regime was all about pushing America back to being in the forefront in the sense of a brand, in sense of being American, right? Was the sense of building our military up, being a power again, puffing out our chest, and saying, in that sense of nationalism that
It
was
was,
really, really pushed down the throats during that time.
it was recovering that image from Vietnam, where we had kind of lost that pride in our military, and
Yes.
not for what they were asked to do, but just because of what they had to do. And some, and the politics behind all that. But during the Reagan era, you're absolutely right. So we see the military budget balloon.
Oh, huge.
And growing up as a military brat, yes, my father was in the Navy for 26 years, career Navy. I lived on military bases, and I have a very vivid memory of it being a very pro-military time. That could have been in the environment that I was raised in, obviously, because I know my wife would tell you she came from a different family background where they weren't pro-military, but I do remember
the country was very pro-military.
Exactly.
No,
and
it was. I mean, I'm just talking from a historical perspective. These are just facts. We're not giving opinions here. These are just historical facts. Don't anybody come say we're trying to push a certain thought here. All we're saying is during that time, a lot of money was invested in military. Like Chris said, we were trying to rebuild an image to the outside world, and it was, and there was a feel of this national glow. I mean, red, white, and blue everywhere. You got the song I'm Proud to Be an American come out during that time. I mean, it was all about America, right? And that was the Reagan time. I mean, it was all about that. And that's where the money, the work went into, which means, hey, we got to make figures, off of this,
so that's what it was, is that Hasbro, it was right to, and you can watch the Toys That Make Us for a little bit more on who pushed, I don't remember
definitely
who pushed, bringing it back, but that's when Hasbro decided the time was right to bring that line back. And based on,
why wouldn't you own the IP,
right? The scale of Star Wars, which allows you to do them at the smaller scale and to make vehicles and play sets and all kinds of different things.
You get the largest play set in the history of play sets during a time when you could sell anything that had an American flag on it.
Yep. But I mean, it was interesting because you had everything from the figures all the way up to the flag, but you had small play sets. You had, like, I remember having it was a little tent, like an observation post, and then there was Checkpoint Alpha, all the and then all the way up to bigger vehicles and things like that. They really hit all of those things, but that was really the military focused era of G.I. Joe. And like I said, it was before the movie, because then we get into from 1987 to 1990. I say that this is during and post G.I. Joe the movie. So 87 covers G.I. Joe the movie. And then you have post that through 1990. So what you have is that you have the movie, G.I. Joe Goes to Space. And that's important because if you've ever collected toys and you've been in this game long enough and it's not a space toy line, what do they say about toy lines that go to space? It's the beginning of the end of the toy line, is what they say.
They're running out of ideas.
Yeah. So G.I. Joe Goes to Space. Now, granted, they went on for a long time after that, but
thank God Desert Storm happened.
Well, yes, but I mean, you still have some military.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but
you
still have some military aspects in the line, but we're really starting to focus on that sci-fi theme that came in from G.I. Joe the movie.
Right.
And for me, 1988 was the last big year for the line for my brother and I. I actually did, because I have a book about the vintage line, and it's a great resource. And I wish I could remember who did the author. He's featured in the Toys That Make Us too. I can't remember his name, but he's wrote books on Transformers, on Star Wars collectibles. But We had some figures from the 89 run. And then you think about what's going on at, when we get to kind of that run, 89, the Berlin Wall falls, marking the beginning of the end of the Cold War, and a couple of years from there, I think 3 years, the end, we have the collapse of the Soviet Union, which is
Right.
huge. Right. And so we
And
start
then the
to,
shifts, and then the shift in dynamic to the Middle East at that point. Yeah.
yes. Right. And then that's where we go into from 91 to 94. The military theme in the line is minimal. You have bright colors. We're starting to focus on it's really sci-fi themes and social consciousness rule the line, like Echo Warriors. You've got the drug elimination force. That was a real thing. You get this Star Brigade, you got Sky Patrol, Ninja Force, but the line we've moved away from the military aspect of the line, and we're now moving in a different direction. Even though when that was going on, we had, the Gulf War happened from 90 to 91, but after we were done with the Gulf War, we really kind of entered, we entered into a time of peace where we didn't really have that. And I do want to point out, because I have vivid memories of, and this, for better or worse, when the Gulf War happened, my brother and I, even though we were starting to kind of age out of it, we dragged out some of our G.I. Joe toys because it was the first war that was like televised on TV.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I, I've heard stories of other people who did that as well. You look back on that now and it's a little horrifying to think about,
bit,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really kind of one of those things, but
I mean, hey, you're a kid and you're just,
right,
imitating what you're seeing. Yeah.
Right. You there was a disconnect there, and you're still,
of course,
at a younger age. But I thought it was important to bring in some of these things that are going on as we talk about the line, especially Real American Hero, because it does kind of, you can see it translate through the line. And then of course,
Rebirth.
Well, yeah, before we get there though, I think it's important to point out that Palatoy, much like the 12-inch line, they do their own 3.7.
Right. Much like Star Wars 2, Palatoy pretty much managed the UK side of things. Yeah.
Yes, but they did Action Force from 82 to 85, which was actually a homegrown Palatoy thing. It was only in only in 1985 that they started to put G.I. Joe figures from America released in there, released in the UK under the Action Force name. Later it was switched to G.I. Joe the Action Force, and then finally it was just G.I. Joe. Kenner and later Hasbro, as we know, would acquire the Action Force name. The name Action Force is now owned by Valiverse. That was not used for several years and was available to be purchased. And so now we have, we're talking about rebirth of lines. Well, you have the rebirth of Action Force as well, which, as we get into the next segment of G.I. Joe, the two have competed and I think made each other better. A lot of collectors love to debate which year is the best in the line. I think it's hard to pick one. I say for me, 84 to 86 is my sweet spot. That's where I enjoyed it the most. But as you pointed out, Brian, fast forward to 2020.
That's a lot of time, everybody. Think about it. What the last stuff was really come out, 94, 95? Really?
The last A Real American Hero. There was several other G.I. Joe iterations between then, but nothing that stuck around for more than a couple of years.
Right. So, I mean, at least probably a good 20 years of very little or middling options of G.I. Joe. And then all of a sudden, bam, you get hit with some classified information in 2020, right? And out becomes, not only are we bringing back G.I. Joe in full force, but we're bringing it bigger and better than ever as 12 scale 6-inch figures, because that's what we do at Hasbro now.
Yeah. You're not wrong,
right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of I don't know that people knew that this line was coming.
It was a surprise. Yeah,
it-
I think it surprised a lot of people.
Yeah, it wasn't like Motu Origins where we'd heard about it for a couple of years before they actually got it back fully. This was kind of like boom, we're here. And Toy Fair 2020 launched with the Double O Deluxe Edition Snake Eyes, which that launched during Toy Fair. You had to get it while Toy Fair was going on. It was very limited. I think they ended up doing a second run, but that was kind of a homage to the line. And then we didn't really have anything until I want to say late summer, early fall. Classified started more sci-fi aesthetic when it came out,
Right.
And again, I think that Hasbro was leery to lean into that military aspect, even though at $20 kids were not buying these.
This is true. Kids aren't going to buy a $20 6-inch figure.
Yeah, I think clearly, they were focusing on the audience that had grown up with these. And, in 2021, they started to move away from the sci-fi feel and they leaned heavily into the real American hero aesthetic. And the line in my opinion, the line really found its stride in doing so. I think that's what most collectors, not all, there are collectors that wanted them to kind of continue with where they were going. But collectors like me, we wanted them to kind of like lean into that aesthetic from our childhood and those characters. It's been talked about that maybe if they wanted to relaunch like the sci-fi, they should have just relaunched using the G.I. Joe name, but invented brand new characters. Because as soon as you put Roadblock out with like this weird looking sci-fi laser gun, all of us, that grew up with it are like, you're raging. And I don't want to say raging, but there was a lot of internet rage going on about that. And I think now that Classifieds has grown into one of the most popular collector lines around at the moment.
I agree. Yeah, it has. Yeah. It's definitely, if not the most popular line to collect, it's one of the top 3 easily right now in the community. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll say, so for instance, I've watched, new Star Wars pre-orders go up, and it's very seldom anymore that you'll see Star Wars stuff sell out when it goes up. I'm talking regular wave stuff, not exclusives. And they'll put up Joe stuff and it'll sell, some of it'll sell out. And I'm not seeing that with other toy lines.
And it's also evident when you look at the crowdfunding and Kickstarters too. Whether it's Valaverse or whether it's G.I. Joe, it always makes it. They're always going into production.
Yeah. So we've had, the Sky Striker under the O-Ring funded. We've had the Hiss Tank, and then we have Action Force, which funded. It took 2 rounds of Kickstarter to get it funded, but once it got funded, I mean, it's been running strong.
Now it's its own machine. Yeah,
it is. And really, I think you have a lot of fans of both. There are some fans that are just strictly one or the other, but I'm one of those fans that I'm collecting Valaverse and I'm collecting G.I. Joe. And I feel like those 2 brands, this is what we're missing in collecting. They're forcing each other to be better. So Valaverse came out with some innovations, and then Hasbro upped their game, the G.I. Joe team upped their game, and then Bobby saw that and upped his game. And so we're getting this where the competition is making them each better. And I think that can only be good for us as fans. So, I mean, that's one of the positives there. I also want to say, we talked about that Snake Eyes movie. They did a wave of classified figures supporting that movie. They did not do well. You can still find them today, and fans. A lot of fans of the line are, kind of constantly saying, "Hey, I'm never going to see the new stuff because I got this movie stuff hanging around." For me, it's the Lady J that's hanging around at mine. My Walmart must have like, I don't know how many Lady J's in the regular packaging, and now they have a full peg full of the retro on the card of her. So I'm having to get my stuff online because I'm not seeing the new stuff come out for quite a while, at least in my area, unless I kind of go to other stores. But uh we've got 25 figures in the pipeline that have been announced for the classified line. So it's kind of crazy to see where we've come from a line, that started in the 60s to where it is now, and just kind of the power behind that toy brand. You know, I think for me, I've talked about it before. The big three that I grew up with were Star Wars, G.I. Joe, and Masters of the Universe. And I think for
Right.
me, G.I. Joe was the biggest chunk of time of my childhood. So yeah, it's been interesting to see where it's gone, and it's hard to believe that it's 40. I'm a little bit older than GI Joe, not much.
Well, let's see it this way. It's 40 years old, but it's, as I was saying earlier, this is the next generation. So think of this as the children of those that started, right?
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
true.
it's not as if it's the same rendition of Joe, right? It's the next generation of it. And that's why I think the brand continues to be successful, is because it found a way to evolve and grow with its fan base. Um, and the question is, how will it be in the next 20 to 40 years? I think that's the what you wonder, but I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but there will always be conflict in the world. So there will always be a need of people to protect us, right? Or fight for us. So in that case, I think they're not going anywhere for a while.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to make. But I also think that um, Valaverse is a smaller company. They don't have, at least not yet, they're not putting out other licenses or other things. I know that there's, Bobby wants to get to that point with Valaverse. But he's not so much worried about that. I mean, if you look at those figures, they are very much leaning into real world military, real world weapons, real world gear, real world the camouflage. GI Joe still kind of exists a little bit outside of that real world. I mean, you're not gonna roll up on a military base and see a guy wearing a football jersey and an army helmet in a real military outfit. That's just not gonna happen, right?
Right.
But it does have that military aspect to it. That's what I love about the line. But I think the point that I want to make is that I think that Hasbro realizes, as Valaverse came up with some innovations and Hasbro decided to kind of follow suit, move away from those quote unquote Nerf guns, as what people called them at first,
Yeah.
to packing in more real world weapons and removable magazines and things of that nature, that they've realized their audience is not children, right? Their audience for this line is those of us that were collecting a real American hero in the 80s. The problem with that is, like you said, Brian, where does the line go if we're catering to those of us that collected these, in the 80s and early 90s? Where does the line go for children? Or does the line even last that long? Or does it go on hiatus again and they find a new way to bring it out to appeal to a new generation? It's like you said, it'll be very interesting to see.
Yeah, exactly. Because, current younger generation, they have their own version of it in the sense of Fortnite, right?
Yeah, good point.
In some ways, there are some similarities there. Um, and I'll be curious to see when they become adults, down the road, what kind of things will they be interested in, and their children, and so forth and so on. It's watching the evolution of that industry. um you know it's interesting because that's even a larger topic. Is you wonder what the next generation is going to look like, because our generation decided to reinvent themselves as kids as a much later in later age, right?
Yeah.
We were kids when this stuff was coming out, and then now we're adults, but we still like it. What's going to happen in 20 years when the next generation gets to our age, or they grew up with more, interactive, digital based interactions, through gaming and through other types of things. So are they going to feel as connected to physical items? And one day when we're all gone, what's going to be the focus? But that's a bigger topic for another time, and it's something scary to think about when you think about the industry, because you wonder where if it has sustainability after after the next 20 years or so.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a great point, because we talk about the fact that our generation has driven, not intentionally, it wasn't our generation, but the manufacturers, the Hasbros of the world, all of these companies that cater to our nostalgia, right? We have dominated the pop culture landscape for much longer than any generations that came before us.
True.
Right. Because we just it keeps getting reinvented or regurgitated in some different form. And so, we talk about those G.I. Joe movies that came out that were kind of made more for a wider audience there, Star Wars being, reinvented for a new generation.
Right.
I won't say reinvented. I think you said earlier,
repacked,
which is perfect.
Yeah.
But we've dominated that landscape. So these kids, from a pop culture toy perspective, there are things out there that that are theirs. Like, I had no idea Fortnite was so popular, but I've been hearing this Christmas season the kids in the aisles talking about Fortnite toys. I want a Fortnite toy, Mom. And I didn't realize, I look
Not
at
all
them
of us
and I
can
go,
be like the Foosh,
right. But I look at them and I go, man, aren't you
Robo.
young? Aren't you young to be wanting Fortnite toys, like a game based on violence? And I'm like, what am I talking about? I was playing with G.I. Joe figures,
right?
You know what I mean? But it's just, you're viewing the world through a different lens than when you were a child,
right.
Where you're not equating like what these toys actually, maybe, what the video game.
They're all gonna go run out and buy Avatar toys.
I'm not seeing those toys move.
I just want to see how long you can hold it. Oh my gosh. That is the only thing I still see sitting on the shelves every week.
And it's a shame, because I will say this, they look great. They do look nice. But
they do.
And they're priced
Can
fairly.
I say Lord of the Rings Toy Biz all over again?
Yeah, I think so.
They look great, but no one who enjoys those things feels the need to collect items about them.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yep. But, like
it's
I said,
not toyetic in the sense of someone wanting to recreate the film, because the Avatar is I said this earlier to my wife. I said, when I see Avatar, I see where video game meets film. That's what I see. It's an amalgam of Unreal Engine and creating filmatic experiences. It's like taking the cinematic element of a very up-to-date or forward-thinking video game and making it into a full-length film. Like, that's how I see it. Like, that's how it looks visually to me. Like, it looks like a video game. Like, it doesn't look like, it looks fantastical. Like, none of it feels grounded in reality.
Yeah. No, I
there's nothing against it. I mean, I think that's something for a lot of people. Love that, and that's great. And it is what it is, But I just don't see how it can lend itself to toys, because people can't see themselves being a 9-foot alien fighting against colonists. I mean, I don't know.
Right. I mean, I get what I hear what you're saying. I think that you're right, though, because I mean, I look at the modern video game industry, at least for these big titles, like for instance, the big one that just came out is God of War Ragnarok.
God of War, right? There's one.
Or we had last year, we had Forbidden West, that came out, which was the sequel to Horizon Zero Dawn, and those games. And I think we play those video games, at least I do. I love playing those games because when I play those games, I'm escaping my reality. I'm becoming that character in that world. And that's what Avatar feels like. It feels like I'm trying to escape reality. It doesn't feel like it's something that's based on something that would actually, at least not in our point in history, that would take place right now.
That's what makes good science fiction is because it still feels like it's something that could happen.
Yeah. Right, exactly, and that's that. I mean, I know Star Wars is science is more,
but they're still grounded
science fantasy. But you've got Star Trek where that feels
there's so much realness that happens in it that you can connect with. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to connect to characters that look absolutely nothing like you, right? We talk about representation in film. A 9-foot blue alien, it's kind of hard to connect with as a character in a film. Yeah.
And I think you just brought up something else to kind of bring it back to kind of G.I. Joe and kind of wrap it up.
Sorry, I went off on that.
No. I think that I think you and I need to have a conversation offline because there's a lot of great themes there for future shows that we could talk about.
Yeah,
I think are great. But to bring it back to Joe, there were other toy lines we talked about. But one of the things that was great about the Real American Hero line is, for a line of its time, it was incredibly diverse. And that's one of the things I didn't put in the show notes. And I'm glad that you brought it up, because I think we need to talk about, in the 80s, it was, you had females in the line.
Yeah, you did.
You had Native American, you had African American, you had Hispanic people that were G.I. Joes. And later on in the line, we get into international G.I. Joes. So we have British people, we have Russians that are that are G.I. Joes that become part of G.I. Joe. It was a very diverse line for its time. And we didn't really, we weren't there yet. We didn't start coming around to that until the 90s.
Yeah.
So it was a line that I think was in some respects ahead of its time in the way that how inclusive it was. And the scope there. So I think that that's a good place to end it. I think that, it's been a toy line that has managed to stay in the public eye and remain popular for a long, long time. And not just from the 80s, like we said. There are people that still collect the stuff from the 60s into the 70s. There are
absolutely.
There's a whole group of people that still collect that stuff at the 1/6 scale. I don't think you see it as much, but it's there.
And there was an Indiana Jones crossover, I'm just gonna
say. Yes, that is true.
Yeah, there was.
Before we wrap it up, I did want to point out, I've talked a lot about The Toys That Made Us. They have an episode on Netflix. I think it's worth watching if you want to hear some of the more detailed stuff.
It really is good. And it gives you even more perspective, goes into a lot more depth than what we did today.
Yeah.
And it has a lot of great interviews with some of the individuals that Chris referenced earlier, that I think it's great to hear their eyewitness accounts of the experience.
Yep. And then, if you wanted to learn more about Palitoy's Action Man and Action Force, I recommend you go check out Analog Toys YouTube channel. He collects Action Man and Action Force, and he knows a lot about that particular line, more than I ever know or whatever. I think he's even done a documentary, and he's in touch with one of the original Palitoy creators. And things like that. So if you want to get more about that, I would check that out. Some good resources. And, there's tons of collecting books on G.I. Joe and stuff too. But I'm just, my final thoughts is I'm enjoying this renaissance of G.I. Joe in its classified form. It's got me to go back and buy some of the 25th anniversary line and 3 3/4. The nice thing about Motu Origins and the new G.I. Joe retro O-ring / 25th anniversary, although I know those are a little older, and classifieds, is it's kept me from having to go back and get the vintage. So like with Star Wars, I went back and bought I have the whole vintage run. But these modern toy lines have kind of helped, not have to go back and feel like I need to buy the vintage ones again for my childhood. Because I feel like what I'm getting is, well, it's not a carbon copy of what I had. The feel is there.
Most definitely agree with you. And what I'm gonna leave us off with is a classic PSA from those who know best. G.I Joe.
Hi guys, can I skate with you?
Nah, you're just a girl.
No kidding.
Go ho!
Let her try. You might be surprised.
Okay, but thanks. Wow, look at that.
Don't judge people till you give them a chance.
Because there's a chance you could be wrong. Now we know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe.
Well, Brian, I think that's going to do it for this episode. Come back next month to hear us talk toys and collectibles on Thrill of the Hunt, a collector's podcast. Until next time, we wish you good luck on your toy hunt.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this show, we would love a 5-star review on iTunes. You can find Thrill of the Hunt, a collector's podcast, on Facebook at Thrill of the Hunt Collector Podcast. There you can interact with us and find links to our other social media channels. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed in this show are those of the hosts and belong solely to them. This podcast is not affiliated with any of the toy companies or licenses mentioned in the show. This show may not be reproduced, repurposed, or redistributed without express written consent from the hosts.